Stop being dramatic. Your brother is launching the prototype tonight while you lie there complaining. Grow up and deal.
Tomorrow morning, his entire fake empire falls.
You are a talentless drain on this family, and as of this second, security will drag you outside. Touch her again, and every loan, patent, and property under your name will be repossessed before the sun sets.
The boardroom was packed with press, investors, and family friends when my father raised his champagne flute, introducing my younger brother as the sole genius behind the medical technology that was supposed to revolutionize spinal rehabilitation. My back was still stitched tight, locked in a rigid support brace beneath my jacket, the sharp ache radiating down my nerves with every breath. I stood at the very back of the room, invisible to the crowd, while my brother smirked from the podium. My father leaned into the microphone and announced to the room, "My son built this company from nothing, while my daughter spent her time complaining and leeching off our legacy." The room erupted into polite chuckles, and my brother raised his glass toward me in mock sympathy. As the flashbulbs went off and my father motioned for security to escort me out of the building I had spent 5 years building, I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I reached into my coat, pulled out a thick black leather portfolio, and signaled to the head technician at the primary display console. "Remember that detail, it matters later." 3 weeks earlier, I was lying in a cold ICU bed, staring at the fluorescent lights while the postoperative anesthesia slowly wore off. I had just undergone a complex 9-hour spinal fusion surgery, a procedure to correct a debilitating injury I sustained while managing the field tests for our family's medical technology startup. My father had promised he would be in the waiting room. He promised he would hold my hand when I woke up. Instead, when I opened my eyes, the visitor chair beside my bed was completely empty. A single cold tray with untouched hospital jelly sat on the nightstand. When I called him, my voice raspy and barely audible from the intubation tube, he didn't ask how the surgery went. He didn't ask about the pain. "Stop being dramatic," my father snapped over the line, the background noise blaring with acoustic music and clinking glasses. "Your brother is launching the prototype tonight. The investors are all here. I can't leave him alone to handle this. You're in a top-tier hospital surrounded by doctors. You don't need me holding your hand. Grow up." He hung up before I could answer. For 7 straight days I lay in that room in complete solitude. My brother never called. My father never sent flowers. Every evening I watched the social media updates from my phone, videos of my brother popping $50,000 bottles of champagne, boasting about his genius design, while my father beamed beside him, giving media interviews about how proud he was of his only true successor. What neither of them realized was that every single line of software code, every blueprint, and every international patent application for that medical device had been designed exclusively by me. My brother couldn't write a single functional script if his life depended on it. But in my father's eyes, a daughter was just background labor, while a son was royalty. On the 8th night, a night nurse walked into my room carrying a small, unpretentious gift bag. Inside was a thermos of restorative broth, a soft silk blanket, and a handwritten sheet containing precise medical advice on nerve regeneration exercises. "Who left this?" I asked, struggling to sit upright. The nurse frowned, checking her digital log. "You don't know. He's been coming every night around 2 in the morning since your surgery. He stays for an hour, checks your vitals monitor, adjusts your posture so you don't form pressure sores, and leaves these items." He told security he was family. My heart hammered against my ribs. My father and brother were 200 miles away at a launch party in the city. "Can you show me the security camera footage?" She pulled up the hallway camera feed from the night before. On the screen, a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit walked quietly into my room. He carried himself with absolute authority, but when he stood beside my bed, his hands were remarkably gentle as he tucked the blanket around my shoulders. Then, he turned directly toward the doorway, looking straight at the camera lens. The moment the footage locked on his face, I froze. It can't be. It was the chief executive of the world's largest biomedical investment conglomerate, a legendary titan worth tens of billions, a man my father had spent 3 desperate years trying to secure even a 5-minute meeting with. And standing in my hospital room, he looked at my sleeping frame not as a cold investor, but with a fierce, quiet protectiveness that made my lungs seize. Nobody in that hospital knew the truth. Not my father, not my brother. and certainly not our board of directors. 10 years ago, long before I agreed to work for my father's firm, I was a young clinical intern who saved an elderly patient's life in an emergency room during an unrecorded clinic shift. That elderly man was this Titan's father. Before he passed, he transferred 40% of his venture fund's shadow equity into a private trust, established under my legal name. The man standing in my hospital room wasn't a stranger. He was the sole trustee, and he had been monitoring my career and my family's relentless exploitation of my work from the shadows for nearly a decade. 2 days after I was discharged, I returned to company headquarters, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. I walked straight into the main boardroom where my father and brother were hosting an emergency press briefing. They were celebrating a provisional agreement to sell the company's core technology to an international syndicate for $200 million. When my father saw me enter, his face twisted in visible disgust. He stood up, slamming his hands onto the conference table. "What are you doing here?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "You look like a disaster. You're embarrassing us in front of our key partners. Get out." My brother laughed softly, leaning back in his executive chair. "Sis, go home and rest your back. The real founders are handling the business now. Dad signed over full operational control to me this morning. You don't have a seat at this table anymore." My father stepped forward, grabbed my arm near my surgical incision, causing a sharp jolt of agony down my spine, and signed a security dismissal order right in front of the press. "You're fired. You've been a drain on this family's assets long enough. Security, throw her out." That was their first mistake. They had no idea what was coming. As 2 security guards approached me, the heavy double doors of the boardroom swung wide open. The room fell into dead, suffocating silence. Walking through the door, flanked by 4 senior corporate attorneys and a team of forensic accountants, was the Titan from the hospital camera. My father's jaw dropped. His eyes widened and he frantically straightened his tie, stumbling forward with an outstretched hand. "Sir, what an honor. We didn't expect you until the signing ceremony tomorrow." The Titan didn't even acknowledge my father's hand. He walked straight past him, stopped directly beside me and offered his arm for support. "Are you holding up all right?" he asked softly, his tone filled with genuine respect. "I'm fine," I replied quietly, standing tall and setting my cane aside for the first time in weeks. My brother blinked in complete confusion. "Wait, why are you talking to her? She's just a fired employee." "She is not an employee," the Titan announced, his voice reverberating through the silent hall. His chief counsel stepped forward and slammed a 600-page legal injunction directly onto the center of the conference table. "She is the sole legal holder of every foundational patent, the author of the system software, and as of 20 minutes ago, through her majority shareholding in our fund, she holds 82% of this firm's debt." Pens clattered to the floor. Shocked gasps echoed across the room. My father turned deathly pale, his hands trembling violently as he scrambled to look through the documents. This is impossible," my father stammered. "I own this company, I built it." "You built it on stolen intellectual property," I said, my voice ice-cold and unflinching. Every line of code my brother claimed to write was pulled directly from my private server. Every clinical trial result was signed under my medical license. And while I was lying in a hospital bed praying for my father to show up, you signed away your remaining company equity to secure a high-interest loan from a fund I secretly control. The downfall was instantaneous and absolute. Within 4 hours, federal regulators arrived to seize the company's servers to audit my brother's fraudulent patent claims. By evening, the international syndicate revoked their $200 million offer and filed a massive breach of contract lawsuit against my father personally. My brother, completely unable to explain the technical architecture of the system to investors or investigators, was publicly exposed as a fraud on live financial news. His professional credentials were revoked, and charges of corporate forgery were formally filed against him. My father's personal fortune was liquidated to satisfy the defaulted debt now held by my trust. By the end of the week, the family mansion was scheduled for public auction. Their bank accounts were frozen, and the luxury cars my father bought my brother were repossessed directly from their driveway. 3 months later, I stood on the top floor of the newly rebranded Medical Research Institute. My back had healed completely, strong and steady. My father called me from a cheap payphone outside a legal aid office, his voice broken, weeping, begging me to lift the debt enforcement so he wouldn't face personal bankruptcy in his 60s. He swore he would be a better father. He promised he would make things right. I listened to his tears without a single surge of emotion. When I was in excruciating pain after surgery, you told me to grow up and stop leeching, I said quietly. Now it's time for you to take your own advice. I ended the call and handed the phone back to my assistant. I didn't celebrate, I didn't throw a party. I simply looked out over the city skyline, feeling a deep, unshakable peace. Today my brother works as a low-level data clerk, stripped of his titles and forced to hand over his earnings to pay off legal settlements. My father lives alone in a tiny rented room, completely cast out by the elite circles that once praised him. Meanwhile, the life-saving technology I created is now helping thousands of patients around the world, bearing my name, and my name alone. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments.